next story we're going to talk about is far more uplifting. So I don't want to end on that one. When I was about 18 or 19, I got this design in my head. I was really into metaphysical stuff back then. And I remember I saw this image, and it wasn't magical. It wasn't like it was floating in front of me in fire and talking to me in Enochian or anything like that. It was just this glyph I got in my head. Can't really explain it. I can draw it easily. And it was basically, when I saw it, I knew what it was. It was the symbol of my life. I was like, that's how my life will be charted out. That's the symbol of my life. And I knew about sigils and things like that. So a sigil is basically an inscribed, I'm reading the definition here, is an inscribed or painted symbol considered to have magical powers. So it's basically like a design that is infused with magic, magical thought, magical vibration. So I had this image in my head, and I've drawn it out. People who know me may have seen it on me before, and usually I draw it when I'm bored. But it's always been very comforting to me, because it's a symbol of hope, and it shows the good times and the bad times in my life. It kind of just charts the whole thing out. And I'll see if I can draw a picture of it and throw it up online. I need a scanner. But I had that sigil. What's interesting, so then we're going to skip ahead to what the story is about, is not the magical drawings, but something known as a hypersigil. So a hypersigil is not just a drawing of a symbol, a magical symbol, but it is a living magical work. It is basically a sigil that has its own... It's a sigil in story form, I guess is a good way to put it. People have made hypersigils out of things like poems, of comic books is a really popular one, movies, and things like that. And what it is it is basically taking your life and turning it into a narrative. You live the hypersigil. Grant Morrison is a comic book writer. He's very, very well known in the comic book community. Not real name recognition, but he had a comic book that came out quite a while ago called The Invisibles. You probably know it better as The Matrix, because The Matrix ripped off a lot of the plot, the overall plot of The Invisibles. But for him, The Invisibles was his hypersigil. To him, that's his hypersigil. That is the life he wanted, and he lived through the story of the comic book. And he said, I wanted to live in a glam, futuristic world, so I created a glam, futuristic world and enveloped myself around it, and now I'm living the life I've always wanted to live. Now, sure, being a successful comic book author is part of that, because he has the money to buy those things. But you create... And so imagine what your life is like right now. Now I want you to imagine if going forward, you had to cut a movie trailer for your future life. So you're where you're at right now, but you go, you know what? I want to be this. I want my life to have these elements. I want it to be exciting or exotic or passionate or dangerous. Imagine a movie trailer of you waking up tomorrow, the life you want. Imagine a story, a narrative, where you are the main character and really put your mental thought into that. You are creating a hypersigil by doing that. I've done that with Dead Rabbit. When I was putting up flyers for the show, I go, this would be a scene in the trailer for this story of my life. Of me just going out and doing the groundwork to get this ball rolling. I remember specifically thinking that as I put the flyer up on the community board. I thought, this is a scene in the trailer of the story of Dead Rabbit Radio. This is me taking that first step to get it known to the wider public. And that's how I live my life. I've created this narrative for me. I've created this character that is me. When people meet me in real life, or people who know me listen to the podcast, they're like, ugh, it's just like talking to you. But at the same time, Dead Rabbit is part of a separate space, part of like a magical thought space, a future that I want, and that's how I envision it. I put my hypersigil is Dead Rabbit, and I think about it, and I put it out there, and that's the weird thing. It works. It absolutely works. If the show fell apart tomorrow, you could argue it didn't work. And I'd say, yeah, there was a, convergence of factors and something happened, the show couldn't continue. But that's not going to happen. The show's going to keep growing and growing and growing because I've seen those parts of the trailer. I've already lived those parts of that story. I may get curveballs. I may get plot twists that I don't see coming. But the overall story is the same. If you listen to the early episodes, and I don't know if I necessarily said it on the episodes, I'm pretty sure I did. I did say it in real life. I would tell people, we're going to wait 50 episodes, and then we're going to evaluate the show and see where we're going to do at in the future. Just 2 episodes ago, I was talking about 5 years from now on the show. Like, this is the growth of the show over the next 5 to 10 years. Like, I keep fixing that narrative to go farther and farther into the future. I don't want to preach to you guys, but I think this works. And I think this can work for everybody. And the beauty of it is, it's free. There's no seminar you have to go to. There's no book you have to buy. I will say this, all the information I've given you on Hypersigils is kind of all the stuff that I found. There is this quote, and this is a quote from Grant Morrison. This is how he defined Hypersigils. The hypersigil, or supersigil, develops the sigil concept beyond the static image and incorporates elements such as characterization, drama, and plot. The hypersigil is a sigil extended through the 4th dimension. My own comic book series, The Invisibles, was a 6-year-long sigil in the form of an occult adventure story which consumed and recreated my life during the period of its composition and execution. The hypersigil is an immensely powerful and sometimes dangerous method for actually altering reality in accordance with intent. Results can be remarkable and shocking. You don't have to believe me. It sounds completely foolish. I think it works. I've seen it work. Is it possible? We talked about this with the Despair Code episode too. You hear stuff like The Secret, which is, I've looked into The Secret. Positive thinking is definitely good. There is actually an older book from the late 1800s called The Science of Getting Rich. And you think it's a book about like how to do well in business. It's a book about the metaphysics of gaining property and money. And it is fascinating. It predates this, obviously, and is basically that the universe is full of a formless substance. And when you think of becoming wealthy, the universe wants to provide to you that wealth. But you got to work for it. It's super bizarre. Basically, the premise of the book is there are no a limitation on natural resources. There is no limitation of money. Anyone who wants money can get it, but not just through hard work. You also have to visualize yourself becoming wealthy. And the William Waddles, I think, or Wallace Waddles wrote it. It's fascinating because he goes, you can have 2 hard workers next to each other, and one person is rich and one person is poor. You can have 2 people with the same business. One person is rich, one person is poor. 2 houses on the street. One person is rich, one person is poor. And he's like, if it was strictly because of socioeconomic factors or strictly because of the business you are in, everyone on that street should be poor, everyone in that business should be poor, or reversely, everyone on the street should be rich, everyone in that business should be rich. He said the people who are wealthy are the people who already believe that they're wealthy, and they act accordingly, and the universe recognizes them living that life and then rewards them with it. It's really bizarre. And it has, the author was a Christian socialist, and it has this weird Christian theme running through it. And basically, he's like, God, the universe, everything wants you to be wealthy because you can't truly live life if you're poor. That's almost its own episode. But, I mean, again, I think that your thoughts dictate your reality. And you go, well, Jason, what about the kid living in the Sudan? His hypersigil could just be to get a meal the next day. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. The same reason why I can never answer the question, like, why would a god or any higher deity let children die of cancer? I don't know. But I do think that there is a power to your thought. And if you can create a new reality around it, just try it. That's what I would say. And again, the beauty of like a system like this, no one's selling you anything. It just simply exists. I know it works for bodybuilders. If you talk to any bodybuilder, Arnold Schwarzenegger, any of those guys, they'll say, I visualized myself being muscular, and that is how I got to this point. Well, let me rephrase that. They also had to lift a shit ton of weights. But if you're just lifting weights and you're not visualizing yourself, you haven't created that story. You're not living that character as a monster of a human. You're just lifting your weights. There's a disconnect between the mental and the physical. Imagine your life as a movie. Create a plot around your life. Think of that. Focus on that. And see what happens. I could be wrong. But I think hypersigils work. And if they do, and we have the ability to reshape our own lives, you could say, well, Jason, I want to be a superhero. I want to fly around a building. Can I use a hypersigil for that? I don't know. I do have a theory about that, though, actually. I think that if you really, really wanted to be a superhero and you imagined every day you becoming a superhero, again, I have no proof of this, but I think that you would basically create an alternate reality where you were a superhero. You would still live in our reality, and I wouldn't, like if my best friend every day wished he was a superhero and he created this hypersigil where he could fly around, I think, in theory, in my reality, he would still be Joey. But an alternate reality would open up where he got superpowers. Does that sound insane? Absolutely. Absolutely. Does this whole thing sound insane? Absolutely. Absolutely. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'm not, like I said, I'm not selling you anything, and I don't really know. I believe that it works. I've seen it work for me. But if I'm wrong and a bunch of people want to say that was your dumbest story ever because you're trying to convince me that if I tell myself a story, it'll come true, what do you have to lose if you don't do it? Like I said, the only thing you're losing is time and thought process, which we're going to spend anyways. I've said this before. I will sit at home and I will imagine getting new listeners to the podcast. But at the same time, I have to work on my podcast every single day. I think that's part of it too. I think part of the hypersigil is you create the life you want in your head, but if the life in your head is to be a Major League Baseball player, you got to practice. You got to put that work in. And that's kind of what Wallace Wattles was saying too. If I sat around and said I want to be a super successful podcaster and released an episode once a month, that's not going to work. But I put in the work to do the podcast. I was up till 4 a.m. recording stuff yesterday. And then in my free time, I imagine the future I'm going to have with this podcast. Hypersigils. It's on the conspiracy iceberg. And it may be one of the truest things on there, honestly. We'll find out. Let me know how they work for you. That was a clip from our daily podcast, Dead Rabbit Radio. Dead Rabbit Radio is available anywhere that you listen to podcasts. It's daily paranormal, conspiracy, and true crime news. If you want to hear the full episode that this clip came from, check the link below. Please like and subscribe. And hit that little bell, too. That does some magical stuff. Thanks, guys.